Hi, this is Tammy Miller. I'm the owner of Sage Nutrition Coaching, helping people to understand the biochemistry and the biology behind things that we eat. And I'm here with Kylie Holman, who is the founder of Health Coach Kylie. And she loves to help people switch from unhealthy living into healthy living lifestyles. So hello, Kylie, and welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Not a problem. So today, I would like you to talk a little bit about the biochemistry behind insulin and glucagon. And I'm going to add a little bit in there with receptors in the brain as well. So please let us know about insulin and glucagon.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that introduction. So all of us, we always like that sugar because sugar, it has that really sweet taste and you get kind of addicted to it. And there's sugar in so many different things. And sometimes you don't really realize like when you have it, why you like crave it even more. And so that's a little bit what I'm going to go over. So when you have that sugar, we pretty much all know that your blood sugar goes up. And I like to refer to it as like going up to the top of a roller coaster. So you go up to the top of the roller coaster and your body secretes insulin to bring that blood sugar back down. Now, when it goes back down, our body is kind of gotten a little bit too good at its job because we've been doing it for so long, and it brings it way, way, way down, and it makes you crave sugar even more because it needs to go back up. Well, after this hormone, insulin is secreted to take it's sent out to take the excess sugar out of the bloodstream. And it has three places that it can take that sugar. It can go to your brain, to your blood cells, or to your muscles. Now, if all of those receptors are full because you've been eating a lot of sugar already, then that excess sugar goes right to the hips. And that excess sugar can be stored as fat. And so when your body is producing insulin to bring you back down from that sugar high, it can't produce what is called glucagon. And glucagon, it's super, super important because especially if you're trying to shed that excess weight, because it's the hormone that takes the fat out of storage to be burned. And so if you're eating a lot of sugar, not only are you probably storing some of it as fat, but you also can't release that fat to be burned because the sugar blocks the glucagon production and fat burning. So that's the struggle with having all of that sugar and the insulin being secreted and then not being able to release that fat.
Gotcha. I like it. So you mentioned that we kind of get addicted to sugar. Mm-hmm. And we get sugar and we get that sugar rush and then we crash and we want more sugar. So there's actually a little bit more in weird things going on in the brain behind that. So we actually evolved, and the receptors in the brain that receive glucose, that receive sugar, or other types of sugar, usually it's glucose or fructose. So when the receptors in the brain grab that sugar, they are the same addictive receptors as what we get for becoming addicted to heroin and cocaine. So they attach to those same pleasure center receptors, and your brain and your body goes, woohoo, I love this. And so what happens is you get that addictive behavior. And the reason that we do this, it's actually a logical reason. You know, back when we were evolving and back when we were hunters and gatherers, this was something that was actually quite necessary because it may be a while before you are able to get your next meal. And so when we got to patches of strawberries or carrot fields, these are things that are naturally sweet, and our brain would say, oh, you need to eat more, you need to eat more, you need to eat more, so that we could store that as fat just in case we didn't get our next meal. And so that's how we evolved. And that's great for when we were evolving. But now we're not, in general, we are not wondering where our next meal is going to come from, or If we are, it's, we have so many meals that are so inexpensive that are just filled with sugar that we store it. Like you said, just goes straight to the hips. What a lot of people don't talk about is we have detox centers for cocaine. We have detox centers for heroin. It's actually more difficult to detox off of sugar. And so that's always a struggle.
I read somewhere that sugar was like 8 times more addictive than cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
It is more addictive. It is
That is
absolutely, I'm not sure of the actual percentage or the times, but it is absolutely more addictive than cocaine, which is why it's harder to stop once you have it. And we've all been there. This is the fun of Halloween, right? Yeah. You're just going to have a candy bar or all of the same type of candy bar that's in your kid's bag if you're a parent.
Yeah.
Or all the ones that are left over from the kids that didn't pick them up. So, there's always those good intentions, but because of that addictive nature, it is so hard to get off of that. And our liver is so adept at storing excess glucose in 2 ways. One is as glycogen, which is what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to store 12 hours of glycogen. Again, this is for in between meals when you're fasting, when you need that sugar to run your brain because your brain preferentially prefers glucose. You mentioned the blood cells. Your blood cells, absolutely, your red blood cells absolutely cannot live without glucose. They have no other way to get energy. So they have to have glucose. So, they store that for in between meals, which is great because, in the middle of the night, you need that. But anything that's left over, like you said, they make it into, they're called triacylglycerols. They make it into those fatty acids and they store it for us. So our livers are very, very good at saying, okay, bring me excess glucose. I'm going to store that for you. And like you said, if we don't have glucagon, then we're not going to be releasing that.
Yeah. We're just going to store all of it.
Exactly. And it's frustrating. It is so frustrating for all of us who are storing that fat and trying to get away from that fat.
Yeah, because like you said, sugar's so addictive. And so trying to get away from it, that can be a real struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that we have this roller coaster and we go up on this roller coaster and insulin is released when we have a lot of sugar in our body. So can you talk a little bit about when we have too much insulin and we start to get insulin insensitivity and our cells are not responding to that?
Yeah, so everyone has heard of diabetes, and there's 2 different types of diabetes, and that's kind of what happens. It has to do with insulin. And so when, like you said, when your body stops responding to it, that's usually type 2. And with type 2, your body can release too much insulin, and then your cells kind of stop responding to it. And when your cells stop responding to it, then they're not going to get all of that energy that they need. Like you said, they really need the glucose. And so they don't get enough, and so they're not making that energy. And that's type 2. Now with type 1, your body doesn't make the insulin that works. And so it can't bring that blood sugar back down.
Gotcha. Okay. So that's when we're having trouble with just not responding to insulin because we have too much of it. We have too much sugar with type 2 diabetes.
Right.
And that's always important to know, especially when we hear diabetes being thrown around all the time and, understanding that there really are 2 different types of diabetes, type 1 and type 2 diabetes. That's always important for people to understand. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we've talked about the fact that we get on that roller coaster and we're going up and down, and sugar is very addictive. And so this is a great place to talk a little bit about maybe some glucagon. Okay. So you mentioned that we have insulin and glucagon. And glucagon is one of those things that's released when we are fasting or in a starvation mode. And glucagon is released when the glucose is gone. So glucagon. So your glucose is gone. And we need it. We need glucose for our brain. Our brain preferentially prefers it. We need it for our blood. So we've got to have that, and many cells of our body use glucose specifically for their metabolism to make energy. So when we're talking about glucagon, a lot of people don't realize the difference between fasting and starvation. And so I do want to talk, just briefly touch on what those are and what the real definitions are for the body. Where fasting is in between meals. That is fasting. And so you can fast at, couple of 2-3 hours after you eat, your body is in fasting mode. You've used all that glucose. You've made all the energy you can. So the glucagon goes to the liver and says, hey, let's go ahead and release some of the glycogen that you have stored and release that glucose to the body. Now, what people don't realize is a lot of times we think starvation means that we haven't eaten in days and days and days. And actually, 12 hours of glucose is all that your liver stores as glycogen. Once that 12 hours is up, your body is technically in starvation mode. And when it's in starvation mode, it's going to, first the liver is going to, as you mentioned, the fats, okay, the fatty acids that are stored in our adipose tissue, and it's going to go and it's going to grab that and it's going to break that down and make ketone bodies, which your heart can use, your muscles can use, your brain can use for a short amount of time. And then it can't use it for very long. Okay, so the liver does one other thing called gluconeogenesis, where it says, well, I need glucose. I've got to make glucose for the brain. I've got to make glucose for the red blood cells. There's only one other place to get it, and that's from what we call amino acid skeletons. And amino acids come from protein. So your liver starts to break down protein in your body, specifically muscles, to make glucose for the brain and glucose for the blood. And so starvation mode happens very quickly. And the brain, even though you are still breaking down fats for the brain, the liver will still start to break down muscle so that it can get glucose to the brain, so that you start functioning and thinking more clearly, and so that your red blood cells can actually function.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So glucagon is really, because we always think of starvation as, oh, when people are starving, they haven't eaten, they get, one meal every week or something. And that's actually the definition of starvation, is when the liver gets rid of all the glycogen. So when the liver gets rid of all the glycogen, and it has to start breaking down fat and start breaking down muscle eventually after a few days for the brain and the red blood cells so that they can live.
Wow.
Yeah. So it really doesn't take that long to be in starvation mode. So if you eat dinner tonight and don't eat lunch until noon tomorrow, you're already in starvation mode, technically.
Okay. And the body can start breaking down that muscle that everyone works so hard to get just to stay functioning.
Exactly.
So pretty much starvation and fasting for a long period of time, or starvation, it's not good for you. And it's just going to take away that muscle.
Exactly.
Okay.
So insulin and glucagon, great hormones, great discussion for people to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the definition that you put for glucagon, when the glucose is gone. That's a super easy way to remember it. I'm going to remember that always now.
Perfect.
So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. All right. So if anybody listening to this has questions, our emails are below. Do not hesitate to email us, ask us questions. We can go more deeply into the biochemistry, one of my favorite things to do, go deeply into biochemistry and biology, really help you to understand, what your body does with the food that you eat. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.